Jesus met the Grand Inquisitor. "Did you not tell me that the world hates truth?" "Yes, I did." "So I gave them lies. There is nothing wrong with that." "But lies alone are not enough. People need truth, not only lies." "What do you mean?" "People hate the naked truth, but they need truth. So they love the story about truth." "Well, that is precisely what I gave them." "Yes, but the story about truth is only a preface, a stepping stone to the encounter of truth itself." "But who encounters truth?" "It is the authors of..."
Why does the world need both? The Christian celebrating the divine hiding in the human, and the Jew celebrating the human hiding in the divine. Royalty hiding in worldly poverty is to be understood in light of poverty's hiding in royalty divine. The Gospels proclaim the good news that God is born among men, that there is an unstained womb, the finest, allowing the divine to speak within a world otherwise deaf to the divine, with a voice restoring our hearing as free and inalienable gift. But the divine birth bespeaks a return of man in God. The incarnation points back to man's immediate need to hide back in God. The Jew is waiting for the Christian, who is entrusted with the mission of justifying the Jew in the face of the world, a fallen world that hates the gospel because it abhors a life of return.
Many come to America as a land of opportunities, enticed by the promise of being able to satisfy their individual whims by purchasing a vast array of readily available marketable goods. This vision of America corresponds precisely to the target of old Soviet condemnations of capitalist societies. Societies based on greed and hypocrisy, societies of opportunists. But is this what America is all about? To be sure, America has always been a land of opportunities, but these were conceived originally for the sake of a happiness irreducible to self-satisfaction, a happiness involving a return to the divine source of our rights, which would thereby be inalienable rather than being a function of a machine alienating us from our humanity. It turns out most theists are atheists in the closet. The advocates of atheism generally object to the appeal to God as a way for scoundrels to conceal their own ignorance, their own mischief. And this in the name of the powers of reason, free thinking, which we should exercise without being bothered by any God. The irony, however, ensues, insofar as once you get rid of God, once God is proclaimed to be dead, all the scoundrels come out of the closet, and now they can revel in utter shamelessness without being disturbed. Now, what prevents the appeal to free thinking from serving as a mask, a justification for mischief and for unthinking? And it looks like the appeal to God is the only thing standing in the way. Jesus met today's theist and atheist. We choose whether to believe in God or not, or whether we believe in one God or in another. There are many gods as there are people. There are even as many gods as there are moments of consciousness. But there is only one true God, and the others are false. Who told you that? Why, the Bible. Maybe the Bible is wrong. Besides, everyone reads the Bible differently. You read the Bible however you please. Blasphemy! The Bible's God is the true God, and all others are false. And how do you know that? I know it because I believe it. You mean you want to believe it? But if I didn't, my life would be meaningless. Wait, faith is not willful closure to the understanding, but natural openness to it.
Modern churches surviving in our hedonistic age, tend to teach relentlessly that we should give to the poor. What is implied is that we should give out money to all those who have less than us. This teaching is altogether unchristian, for the Gospels praise poverty as a spiritual asset. The Gospels teach that we should convert our earthly riches into virtue, not by purchasing our seat in heaven, relinquishing some earthly possessions, but by converting our desire entirely from the compulsive one of earthly powers to the free one of heavenly ends. It is all too easy for prodigal hypocrites to give out money indiscriminately to the physically indigent. Christ's call is to use all money judiciously to support the cause of the virtuous, who do not covet earthly riches.
Jesus met the modernist and the Grand Inquisitor. The modernist said, "Religion should be kept private." "No," objected the Grand Inquisitor. "Religion has always been public. Only as public can it stop iniquity, vice, evil in this world." "But religion is a mask of iniquity. It is nothing but hypocrisy." "So what do you propose? The shameless display of vice?" "Wait," said Jesus. "Religion is not originally or properly a mask of vice. It is a call to public recognition of the foundations of public life. It is a call to the truth buried at the heart of our ordinary life. One of the worst and most widespread lies that we are raised as modern men to believe in is that we are going to die. We are already dying, and what we usually call death is merely the cessation of our dying. What is to die? It is to fall back into the past. When we say that we die, we merely mean that we cease falling back into the past. We disappear from the stage in which everyone is falling back into the past. So now the question is, where to?
No laws, rules, regulations, or even formal moral principles, no matter how abstract, ever provide a solution to political or human problems. Otherwise put, there is no political solution to political problems. Hence our founding fathers' warning that laws are publicly useful only where those who interpret them are virtuous human beings, that is, gentlemen. But now you might ask, how do you raise gentlemen without laws? The answer is that laws are part and parcel of the problem to which virtue provides a solution. But this is possible only where virtue presupposes a good underlying all legal orders, a good drawing light out of darkness.
A widespread communist adagio has it that the Jesus of the Gospels would be against all of our churches, which should give out all of their riches, sell them to feed the poor. In reality, all of these riches come from the poor, who gave them to the church to vindicate their own dignity in the light of truth. The Jesus of the Gospels does not teach us to be communists, to be even socialists, to use our riches to feed our bellies, even to survive, but to sell them, to trade them for spiritual goods. In other words, we are to give our earthly life for spiritual ends. This is the trade that the Jesus of the Gospels calls us to live out.
So the monotheistic hypothesis is that there's an ultimate unity.
There's a very widespread tendency today, especially among people who consider themselves as rational or scientific, to see God as a hypothesis that we choose to believe in and that can compensate for the shortcomings of our modern mechanistic, positivistic sciences that try to explain our experience in terms of underlying mechanisms. God now is appealed to as an ultimate guarantor for modern mechanistic reductionism. In earlier ages, however, God was precisely the intelligence that cuts through all mechanistic reductionism, and so he undermines modern science. He doesn't confirm or vouch for it. Niccolò Machiavelli parodied medieval Christianity in exposing ancient idyllic visions or utopian dreams, representations of virtuous or rational societies, as outright masks of vice, lies that do not reflect any everlasting truth. Pagan gods cannot intimate the true God proclaimed by the Bible. Machiavelli taught us that true dreams can be realized through our collective effort, that we should stop dreaming of castles in the sky and begin dreaming of castles we can build on earth. But to build castles on earth, we do not need any God beyond the machine we can use to build to realize our dreams, until we find out that our castle has become the machine itself, a nightmare to escape from.
One of the greatest temptations in our times is to assume that the only evil in the world is the one that is produced by men. We create evil by responding in a bad way to the world. The world we find ourselves in is either beyond good and evil, or it is simply good. Nothing's wrong with it. What is wrong is our response to it. We should therefore fix ourselves, modify our response to the world in order to be rid of all evil. And yet, the world we are in is a fallen one, a world that is obscure, fallen into obscurity, into evil. We are somewhat hapless in its face.
Lever jag i en spökvärld, innesluten i mina drömmar och fantasier. Och trots det vill du inte dö. Jo, jag vill. Vad väntar du på? Jag vill ha vetskap. Du vill ha garanti. Kalla det vad du vill. Är det så grymt otänkbart att fatta Gud med sina sinnen? Varför ska han gömma sig i en dunstkrets av halvuttalade löften och osedda under? Hur ska vi kunna tro på de troende när vi inte tror själva? Vad blir det av oss som vill tro men inte kan? Och vad blir det av dem som varken vill eller kan tro? Varför kan jag inte döda Gud inom mig? Varför lever han vidare inom mig på ett smärtsamt och förödmjukande sätt, trots att jag förbannar honom och vill vräka ut honom ur mitt hjärta? Varför är han trots allt en...
Christianity's corruption is represented today by three denominations. The Protestant one, where mechanistic science is supposed to supplement religious sentiment, compensating for sentiment's ignorance of the how of things. The Catholic one, where natural reason and divine faith are diluted or subdued through decisive concessions to modern mechanistic science. The Orthodox one, where natural reason and divine faith collapse into each other to console us in the face of modernity's mechanistic science. True or genuinely enlightening or salvific Christianity remains obscured as a path where faith is an inalienable virtue, unfolding through natural reason, rising to understanding, to intellection, through the open questions that are the salt of genuine humanistic dialogue, a discourse inhabiting the hiatus between finite and infinite being.
Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. I attribute thought to myself in order to affirm my autonomous being as primordial. the preliminary goal to affirm my autonomous being. But now, if I am, then God must be, for I need God to justify myself before others. So I appeal to God as source of everyone's existence. Most importantly, the God I need to believe in, or seem to believe in, is the source of your existence. Your existence depends upon the God who vouches for my being, for myself as modern, autonomous, abstract individual. The God whom I invoke to protect my modern freedom from all those who might object to it. This is the God on my leash.
Another evil book for children, Unstoppable Us, by a technocrat who sustains that people fight for illusions, for fairy tales. So now what we have is AI, the machine, that will produce fairy tales to bring about world peace. Now isn't that wonderful? In our modern Cartesian world, we're raised to believe that to be free is to do what we please in accordance with certain laws. But that is not at all what freedom is all about. Freedom is in a desire that is irreducible to pleasure. It is in doing what we want freely, with the understanding that that requires knowledge of ends that are compatible, originally compatible with our pleasure, natural ends. So what we have here is an alliance of desire and its natural perfection, which in biblical terms is God. At the center of Raphael's School of Athens, we find two complementary figures, that of Plato carrying his Timaeus, and that of Aristotle representing his Nicomachean Ethics. Plato points with his finger to our ultimate end, the divine, whereas Aristotle indicates with his hand the need for prudence. We are to pursue the divine through prudence. Yet we are also to pursue prudence by looking at the divine. Thus, the two figures face each other. We are to discover the divine in and through the human, and the human in and through the divine. In the wake of Machiavelli and Spinoza, we are raised to see God, in effect, as a means to our empowerment, a fetish subservient to our freedom conceived as self-expression. We use and choose the divine, no less than religion, as contributing to the rise and consolidation of a world bespeaking the triumph of the human will. God is, or is supposed to be, there to confirm our own divinity. Man is no longer the classical image or poetic mask of God, but God's own realization. We need Him as a prop. He needs us to build that which God would otherwise be only nominally. To understand the difference between the king of old Rome and the king of the new Rome, we must understand the hiatus between the two Romes. Both cities share the same name, and both kings share the same initials. Yet the old Rome is as corrupt as Caesar is, while the new Rome stands for the redemption of all shame in Christ. In Caesar, old Rome falls. In Christ it is resurrected, not merely as one nation among others, but as every nation, and in this sense all nations of the world. The New Rome is truly the world, for its geography is purely poetic, its boundaries purely spiritual. Yet spirit is not to be conceived in earthly ways as an idol cut off from our daily lives. The New Rome is the city of God, Civitas Dei, whose citizens are all men living spiritually, or whose spirit is as a tree of life rooted in heaven.
A widespread objection against biblical religion is that an omnipotent God should end all evil. If God cannot, then he's not omnipotent. If he can but doesn't, then he must be evil. However, the classical, canonical notion of omnipotence does not involve doing whatever one pleases. It involves the unity of knowledge, will, and power. Nosse, velle, posse in Latin, which is to say that God can do whatever he wants, and he wants what he knows, which is himself. God's power is wrapped up in his will, and the will in his knowledge. God's power is complete in God himself. God, therefore, does not seek the end of evil per se. Evil is the very absence of causation. The only end of evil is in God himself. One of the forms of alienation that modern technology has fostered is that of knowledge from courage. Throughout the classical world, both ancient and medieval, knowledge was understood essentially as one of various facets of virtue. We have courage, we have prudence, we have justice, and we have knowledge, and these are inseparable from each other. Except that in the modern world, we have a machine that detaches mechanically knowledge from other aspects of virtue. And so you end up with this notion that knowledge is essentially information that anybody, both angel and devil, can grasp, especially devils, in fact. So knowledge becomes dead, sterile, soulless. The sky, the heavens, otherwise known as nature, used to be a sign, metaphor for another world, the world of the mind, the world of the gods. In our modern times, the heavens are an opportunity to build new heavens. We deconstruct the heavens, we figure out how they work. The physical universe can be decrypted, unpacked, deconstructed, so that we may build a new one, a virtual one, if you like. One where we simply have to agree or disagree, not make an effort to understand what is in its essence hidden.
We're told that man seeks God while God seeks man. Are the two running on parallel tracks, whereby perhaps the twain shall never meet? Or has God not already found man as a being who seeks God, who seeks fulfillment in God? What does it mean to seek man? It means to seek him in God. Is God then not seeking man in man's own search for God? Is this search not moved by God to return to God? Where is man to be found if not in God?
Jesus met Adam and Eve. Adam said to Eve,
"Why did you seize the forbidden fruit? You weren't there, and I was seeking truth. I was receiving instructions, and your search was impious."
Adam, you are not originally or fully a receiver, but a giver. As our Father teaches us, by giving himself in what is immediately of himself. Eve, remember, you were found prior to seeking. Listening to the flattering serpent instead of your husband was not a good idea. You were born to give yourself, to receive freely without expectations, so truth may be born through you for the entire world.
How many Christians today are fake? Examine their faith. Originally, the Christian faith
sought understanding. Fides quaerens intellectum. How many Christians, however, today see their faith as an alternative to knowledge and understanding? Worse yet, as supplemented and completed by a knowledge and understanding provided by an external science. Originally, faith was to be the door through which knowledge and understanding proceed, not as things you grasp, but as gifts that you receive.
What you call sin, to me is virtue, and all-powerful death whom you hate, I worship. I turn my back on you lot, on you and your impotent God. Cloud, lightning, such simple wonders you teach your people to fear.
It is not from fear that they leave Sodom, but from faith. Faith in him whose passing shadow may be a cloud, whose voice is the thunder. Look long on that sun. You'll never see it again.
In the Vatican Stanza della Segnatura, the painter Raphael portrays justice as attributing the proper role to philosophy, poetry, and divine revelation. Philosophy attains to knowledge, rational knowledge, of the causes of all things, both natural and moral, where the moral stands here vertically over the natural. This knowledge is transposed through poetry, the winged lady with her feet crossed, to illuminate knowledge of divine things. Divinarum rerum notitia. This knowledge, however, points back downward to philosophy. Thus we are to understand that it is proper to philosophy to illuminate divine things, and proper of knowledge of divine things to point us back to philosophy.
On a certain modern reading, Bereshit, or Genesis, is a chauvinist text that teaches that men are better than women. In reality, however, in the first chapter of Bereshit, we see an immediate divine creation of the anthropos. Adam is the human being, who is at once male and female. In the second chapter, however, we see a gradual formation whereby spirit enters into the earthly and forms it into a male, whence is abstracted the female element. Now the female becomes pivotal to a return to the integrality, we might say, the unity of the human in God.
Aristotle reminds us that if the physical universe were actually infinite, then it would not have a form containing it and preventing its contents, finite beings, from dissipating infinitely and at once. The presence of finite beings, as of the content of our daily experience, testifies to the form of the universe, a form that is evidently not physical. But if the boundaries of the physical universe are not physical, then the physical universe is not physically finite. Within non-physical limits, it is limitless and ever-changing, as a dream in the mind.
Pilate, Caiaphas, come forth, so that I may judge you. Pilate, why did you ask, what is truth?
Well, I meant that was no place for truth. You said you were there to testify to an otherworldly truth. This was fine with me. Since you were not the king of Jews in that world, it was up to the Jews to decide if they accepted you or they sought liberation in that world. In the first case, I was open to listen. In the second, I was ready to crush them.
Caiaphas,
Why did you say one man should die for the people?
Oh, I meant that in dying you showed us all the way to emancipation, and that we should testify to the otherworldly seat of truth.
Thus, Pilate, this being the case, I hereby pronounce you both innocent. Jesus returned to the Grand Inquisitor.
Why did you come back?
Because I cannot be contained by any story.
But the world hates you. Go back to the story you come from.
But I am not of that story, for I was before its beginning.
But before, there was no Jesus.
Don't you see, when I said I stand before the foundation of the world, I meant that the world is a story, just as the Gospels are.
All right, so why don't you stay there and let us move on?
Because what is before is producing every moment of your own story, because I am here beside you, whether you see me or not.
Well, people would rather not see you here. We don't want you in our story.
That won't be possible, for I enter in every moment of your story to lead you out of it. According to Kant, we can have a science of empirical things autonomous of any knowledge of things beyond experience. Infinite progress in modern mechanistic science is autonomous of any divine authority. Why, we can have no real knowledge or science of a divine or metaphysical reality. Hence the importance of developing modern mechanistic sciences, which leave space for our religious sentiment and subjective opinions about ultimate reality. On Plato's account, however, the divine enters in everyday life experience, precluding any autonomy of empirical knowledge from a divine order of things. Empirical knowledge is poetic participation in divine knowledge. It should be moderated to invite reflection on the divine, not bolstered to express or represent ultimate reality. For centuries, scholars have debated over the true nature or identity of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. The story, of course, is a warning to us. Eve does not see the serpent. Nobody does. She hears the serpent in the shadow of God's own spirit, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The serpent is a distortion of God's own voice, the voice that Adam had heard. Now, as a result of following that distortion, Eve falls into a darkness, the darkness that is somehow mimicked by that in which the snake hides. As a result of that fall, we are faced with the challenge of finding a new way, or a good way, to face darkness without falling into it. That is,
love and truth would be compatible, where the object of love were compatible with truth. And so, if what we love were not mere appearances, but something hidden that transpires through appearances, does truth enter mysteriously into the appearances we love, making them lovable? If not, then what we love is a mere distraction from truth, and to love is to betray truth, or to be idolatrous.
In the Gospels, Jesus performs miracles on the Sabbath. The priests object that we're not supposed to work on the Sabbath because God rests on the Sabbath. Jesus responds that they're hypocrites. It's perfectly fine to perform miracles on the Sabbath. So, are the miracles against the law? Is performing miracles not compatible with the law? According to modern readings, it is perfectly fine to work on the Sabbath. And yet, is that the message of the Gospels? Or is it rather not that the miracles are not work? What does God do when He rests? He performs miracles. He gathers all that He has created back into Himself. He saves us on the day of rest. This is what rest is all about. He's not going to sleep.
As modern men, we are dwelling in a Faustian world, a world in which knowledge is power, power to predict, a capacity to master, to conquer nature. At a price, however, says the devil, the obscuring of the mind, the selling out of the soul. We do not, in reality, solve old problems, the problems of fallen man fallen in a condition that Plato had described as a cave. Instead, we enter into a second cave in which we begin creating and solving our own problems, in which all problems appear technical, in which we gain the certainty of power, until we are called back to the first cave with vengeance.
The Count of Monte Cristo, Le Comte de Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, is a response to Christianity, representing most vividly the wisdom of modern man, who seeks to establish justice here and now, in this world, in our life. The main character, Dantes, is an honest man, victim of injustice, of calumny. He seeks to overcome injustice through waiting, hoping, with the aid of fortune, fortuna, even appealing to God for emotional support. Ultimately, he succeeds, through ruse, calculation, to overcome evil. At one price, he has cut his life off from the otherworldly, from what transcends death.
Evil? How strange you are. Where I come from, nothing is evil. Everything that gives pleasure is good.
Where do you come from?
There, not far, just ahead, Sodom and Gomorrah.
Citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah, beware! Your sins cry out for extermination. Even as you whip and force them to mine your miraculous deposits of pure white salt, only to increase the power and wealth of your infamous cities. Yes, your power and wealth rests on salt, and your salt is bought with the blood of slaves. Hear me, O people of Sodom.
It's only alibis.
The modern world is a world of pretense, in which we are expected to pretend to be rather than be. We even fail to be. We can say, in principle, just about anything, properly because everything we say is mediated in such a way as never to be dangerous. What we say is not dangerous insofar as it is feeding into the regime that grants us our liberties. Now, to quote a felicitous expression by Leo Strauss, modern man abides in a second cave beneath or within the first characterizing the fallen condition of man. In the first cave, man is the shadow of a god. In our cave, our second cave, we are shadows of men. As shadows of men, we pretend to be gods. In our technical societies, we are raised to accept the Machiavellian how, why, means, ends split, which sets the stage for the Hegelian evolutionary failed solution or synthesis, where ends build on technical means as facts studied scientifically, as we say, as value-free data abstracted from value. Now, our evolutionary progressive ideology blinds us to a classical, both ancient and medieval, understanding of things, on account of which means are but poetic metaphors of ends. To ask how something comes to be, what or where it is to rise from appearances back to a good end inherent in them. Strictly speaking, there is no how of things. Any abstract how would be but a mask of the why. The African bishop St. Augustine reminds us that the more a problem is real, the less we are capable of solving it. Does this mean that we should give up all of our purported solutions? No, it simply means that these solutions, these purported solutions that we stumble upon in the course of life, are mere masks, mirrors of a fundamental problem. All of our purported solutions point us back to a problem that is not merely there to vex us from outside, but that sits at the heart of our very being, that is our very being, an act that discloses primordially all possible solutions as pointers back to it.
What people call addictions today belongs to the life of compulsion, where we seek to fill a void, a pain, a sense of loss, by filling ourselves with a surrogate for what we truly seek. The surrogate comes at a price, of course. In order to enjoy it, we must forsake the quest for what we really want, that alone which could fill our void without disappointing us. In forsaking what we really or freely desire, we become slaves of surrogate forms of desire. We tie ourselves to a mechanical life, a life of compulsion. All that can free us from our condition is the true object of desire, speaking to us through sweet things, including our surrogates. Even in the darkest night of compulsion, a light shines from within the dark. That life is what we truly seek. To heed the light in the dark is to be freed by that light from all compulsion.
Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et demitte nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos demittimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo. Amen.
In his dialogue, The Republic, Plato inveighs against bad painters, painters who alienate us from reality by copying and reconstructing our ordinary experience of things in mechanical ways. The alienation that is rejected canonically by the classical world is praised in the modern Faustian world, in which we are raised to go beyond the real toward the virtual. We are moving toward the reconstruction of reality through technology, the recreation of identities, ultimately toward the redefinition of being itself as nothing.
Saint Anne sits in the shadow behind her daughter, the Virgin Mary, who stretches out to her heroic child, who holds a lamb by its ears, and does not hold, but merely looks upon Mary, who sits on her mother's legs. Mary emerges out of Anne, behind whom stands an ethereal landscape. The independent child turns to his mother as he holds fast to his lamb, who in turn sees the Virgin through the boy, or with its ears, while the boy sees the mother with his eyes or directly. Between heaven and earth a dialectic unfolds. Pristine nature, couched in her maternal mind, gives birth to a hero who educates a lamb to turn to nature's purity through the hero's discourse, through the hero as living word, as logos, who turns to nature to commune with her mind in the act of taming his body. Poetry is to see in hearing, vision in speech, to see the unseen, the origins of the world, or the world as origins, to heed the unmoved mover, to dwell and breathe in and to be a place beyond all compulsion. The compulsion to reduce problems to solutions, to certainties, including the certainty that solutions are cut off from problems, that we can pragmatically escape metaphysics and hide in mere talk and then apply the talk to silence the questions, its spring eternal. The enemies of poetry? Those who hate its destination.
People today are raised to feel, not think. To hide from thought by hiding in a machine, telling us that all we need to do, all we're born to do, is express our feelings and turn our world into a gigantic bundle of feelings managed by a single mechanical peacemaker. To this, a solitary voice crying in the wilderness responds, "Truth is a ray that cuts through all feelings and machines alike, to redeem the former in thought and consign the latter to hell's fire."
In our modern Cartesian context, we are raised to conceive religion in terms of subjective beliefs and objective practices. Outside of our Cartesian conceptual bubble, however, religion is not at all primarily about subjective belief or objective practices, but about a living tie between the human and the divine. What we call organized religion amounts to the institution standing as formal guarantor of the living tie between the human and the divine, and so of the inalienable dignity of all men as defined by a divine mandate to ascend from barbarism to civility, and so to a poetic life reflecting as a mirror image divine providence in nature.
The modern world is established against all religious wars. Old traditional religions are at war against each other, each seeing its language as rooted in a divine presence that needs to be vindicated. Modern man considers language in terms of universals, abstractions, the meaning of which is determined by our collaboration. It is pointless to fight against each other to determine the meaning of words. What does God mean? What is justice? The meaning is determined by universal collaboration. In fact, universal collaboration becomes the fundamental principle of the modern world at war against all traditional religions, against all traditional gods. And this universal collaboration is secured by a new machine, a new God, at war against old gods.
Ellie, I know it's hard to understand this now, but we aren't always meant to know the reasons why things happen the way they do. Sometimes we just have to accept it as God's will.
Should have kept some medicine in the downstairs bathroom. Then I could have gotten to it sooner.
In our neo-Gnostic or Faustian age, we might be inclined to see the Jesus of the Gospels as calling us to follow his teachings. After all, did he not call us to turn the other cheek, to love our enemy? In reality, these calls are calls to see our enemy in light of a transcendent truth, of a truth transcending all tribal warfare, all tribal factions, no matter how global. We are to transcend all conflict by following truth itself, truth incarnate, and truth as sitting on the right hand of the Father. According to Socrates, we are ignorant of the most important things. We have no divine wisdom. However, our ignorance translates at once into knowledge that what is most important for us is the quest for knowledge of the most important things, things that are always eternal things. Socratic ignorance exposes us to knowledge of our divine mandate to seek divine wisdom. Evidently, Socrates assumes that there is such a thing as divine wisdom to be sought. He assumes that his quest is ultimately grounded in the actuality of divine wisdom. Socrates' quest presupposes not the mere possibility of divine wisdom, but wisdom's actuality, and so the actuality of intelligible being, the actuality of the world in a divine mind, the world of pure intelligibility. We're usually presented Socrates and the whole philosophical Platonic tradition in Gnostic terms as teaching that evil is reducible to ignorance, amathia. This ignorance can be overcome through certain techniques of self-control because ultimately it is due to lack of self-control or akrasia. This vision of knowledge as ultimately a question of control ties into, of course, the neo-Gnostic modern view of knowledge in terms of technology. But it has nothing to do with Socrates, who does not conceive of himself as an autonomous ego a la Descartes, but as human providence tied necessarily to divine providence. At first glance, it might seem that there's a fundamental rift, a divergence between the message of the Gospels and that of natural reason, or ancient philosophy, here represented by Socrates. Socrates tells us, in fact, that nobody wants freely to do evil. On the other hand, St. Paul tells us that in some cases, people willfully go on sinning even though they have received knowledge or news of truth. Voluntarie, ekousios, willfully, they keep on sinning. How is that? Is there no contradiction then between Socrates and St. Paul? And the answer is no, for it is obvious even to Socrates that some people do evil because of lack of courage. Knowledge of truth is not enough. You need courage to avoid evil.
When I was young, you know what I used to believe? I used to believe that good things happen to good people.
You don't believe that anymore?
No.
What do you believe?
Lots of things. I believe that we have hardly any control over our destinies. I believe that people are selfish. I believe that most people live unfulfilled lives.
Any comforting ones?
Aristotle reminds us that people began philosophizing out of fear of divine retribution, reverential fear or thauma. No, not mere wonder. Ancient philosophy is not romanticism. The ideological founders of the modern world, however, sought a new beginning for philosophy. As Descartes sought to convince us, philosophy begins with doubt, as an attempt to overcome doubt. But what about ancient philosophy? It had never aspired to suppress all doubt scientifically. Quite to the contrary, it had sought in doubt a proper response to fear. And in the best of cases, in the Platonic tradition, it had found in doubt a way to convert fear into faith, the compulsion to submit to law or divine authority into self-sacrificial openness to the truth, the mind of the law.
Finding himself weak and distracted in a fallen world, man tends to confuse his sentiment with reason, often mistaking as sacred certainty a compulsion dictated by obscure forces. What is simply right is identified with what we feel to be right. What is right for us tends to be identified with what is right in and of itself. Natural right proper begs for vigorous representation, a formal vindication provided by the institution of religion. Christianity comes to defend natural right in light of biblical revelation as a natural law of which we're all supposed to have a conscience. Natural law inherent in the human being as such.
Eie Kyrie, ego mio on. I will be what I will be. In the Greek, the phrase reads, I am being, because the Greek is a philosophical language, a Platonic language, where the text is translated into Greek from the Hebrew. I will be what I will be. The future belongs to God. For the Greeks, the future belonged to the gods, to fate. It came. As we still say, the future will come. We never build the future. The future is not in our hands. The illusion that we are moving towards the future in a linear way is a Cartesian illusion based on a new self, which says, I am.
Today it turns out that the genius of modern man consisted of legalizing corruption. How could this have happened? Well, at the beginning of the modern world, the idea was that if we can conceive law in strictly mechanistic terms, as a machine, in the hands of gentlemen, then we can improve the human situation. Well, what has happened in the course of the unfolding of the modern world is that we have progressively lost the moral and intellectual backbone of early modernity. The result is that now we are little machines within the mechanical law, trying to use the Leo Strauss reminds us that the elimination of theology from philosophy points directly to the reduction of philosophy to the ideological plaything of technocracy. Insofar as philosophy's fundamental question pertains to the nature of God, by severing itself from the question of the divine, philosophy converts at once into an instrument of the powers that be. But now, today's powers that be are represented by the technocratic regime, or the so-called open or global society, a society that conceives all problems as technical, or reducible to mechanisms, or ultimately framed by mechanisms. Indeed, technocracy consolidates as the regime of the machine, or as the apotheosis of the machine. By cutting itself off from theology, philosophy falls straight into the service of a deus ex machina.
Dostoevsky reminds us that under the assumption that there is no God, only a vigilante superhero, a hero beyond good and evil, can compensate for the inevitably dire shortcomings of law. However, in our brave new world, our technocratic regime, the vigilante is a savage used hypocritically to boost showbiz ratings and to remind everyone that outside of subservience to the pretense of law, to law as godless machine, there can be no salvation, for salvation in our hedonistic society is but safety, and to step outside of the matrix is most dangerous and therefore necessarily bad. Hence the enduring pertinence of Dostoevsky's reminder that tyranny feasts upon its godless opposers.
You folks happen to know what the main trouble with this country is?
Oh, I've heard several versions of that.
Do you know, Sylvester?
Well, I think I do. The main trouble is there are too many people who don't know where they're going and they want to get there too fast.
Genesis offers us two accounts of divine creation, presupposing a common ground. The first account is in God's eyes, the second in man's own. In God's eyes, creation is a display of timeless forms through division. The last form, of course, is the human one, which mirrors God himself, so that God may now rest. In man's eyes, creation involves a gradual emerging out of darkness. Forms evolve out of each other through constant divine intervention. We are presented no synthesis of these two seemingly contradictory accounts, no third account reconciling the first two. Why? Is the absence of a third account intended to invite us to transcend given accounts and rise back to their living source? Is the first account a master key helping us understand the second?
Modern science has nothing to teach us about the question of evil. We might be diseased, sick, malfunctioning, even broken as machines, never afflicted by evil. When we seek to confront the question of evil, we tend to turn to religion. However, religion today has this tendency of approaching the question of evil in typically romantic terms that betray an underlying anxiety, which in turn feeds into modern science, which modern religion relies on. We are far here from a classical poetry that invites the human being and the human mind to ascend into a divine mind beyond evil.
Philanthropy, or universal love of humanity, was never proper either to man or to great men, and was not named, if not once that, due in part to Christianity and in part to the natural course of the times, the love of the fatherland having disappeared, yielding to the dream of universal love, which is the theory of not doing good to anyone, man came to love no one other than himself, and hated less foreign nations, hating much more his neighbors and companions, compared to whom the foreigner must have naturally been, as he is today, less hateful to him, since the foreigner opposes himself less to the egoist's interests, and since the egoist has no interest in surpassing, envying, etc., distant people as much as he does neighbors. Giacomo Leopardi. Christianity told us that the true God, the Hebrew God, had died unarmed among fallen men, even as he lived eternally in heaven. For the light came, though darkness could not appropriate it. Islam called God back with a vengeance, strong and mighty as Isaiah had promised, like a hailstorm or destructive tempest, like a driving rain or flooding downpour. He will smash that crown to the ground. To avert divine wrath today, must Christians not learn from both Jew and Muslim? From the former, our mandate; from the latter, the price for betraying it. One of the gravest and most widespread misconceptions about Christian medieval theology is that it was against doubt. In reality, medieval Christian theology, even canonical medieval Christian theology, is all about doubt. It seeks doubt. It asks questions. It begs for philosophy to intervene, to help us make sense of things, to make sense especially of biblical authority, of the biblical message. What medieval Christian theology is against is absolutely not benevolent doubt, reason, freedom. It is against malevolent suspicion, especially when it's directed against
the biblical message. The suspicion will be at the root of heresy, and ironically, it is guiding us.
Contrary to what modern ideologues of freedom have taught us, medieval theology does not involve a cage imposed ex machina upon human reason, but a sphere of intelligibility, acquiring authority in its being revealed, vindicating natural reason, or signaling natural reason's sacred hidden destiny. Accordingly, St. Bonaventure's Reductio Artium ad Theologiam discloses rather than detract from freedom. The Franciscans' reductio is not reduction, but restoration. Natural reason is rejected by the early prophets of the modern world in favor of a mechanistic reason that is not grounded in mystery, but in the absurd. The mystery of divine coincidence between reason and authority or law is replaced by the fake, symbolic authority of autonomous reason, or by materialism making up its own laws to keep chaos at bay.
The modern Enlightenment has had this terrible effect of leading us to assume that words are external to things, that things have no language of their own, that words are as universals to be mechanically or from the outside applied to things, to words, to nature. Yet poets remind us that prior to existing outside of things, words are inherent in things. There is the language of things, the language of nature. So words can at best mirror that language. Given our fallen condition, we are deaf to that language, partially deaf, but they can also alienate us further from the language of things, leading us entirely astray.
The wisdom of antiquity is represented most emblematically by the medieval teaching of fides quaerens intellectum, faith seeking understanding, trust asking for understanding. The ancients were outwardly strict about obedience before the law, above all that of fathers. Yet the medievals evoked and defended a properly divine or hidden element in ancient obedience, which presupposed a fundamental twofold trust. Trust that your father's orders are meaningful, and trust that you as son are capable of understanding what your father means, the meaning of the authority you are to be otherwise outwardly obedient to. This ancient twofold trust is a virtue, that in virtue of which we live humanly, that medievals upheld as divine gift.
Debates between theists and atheists are not what they used to be. They used to be about atheists trying to justify their impiety. Today, they are about theists haplessly trying to justify their piety. The shift was coeval with the rise of a new context supporting the atheist cause, technocracy. In our technical societies, everyone must concede that names cannot have a univocal meaning, that meaning is never inherent but supplied by a marketplace of historical forces indifferent to any inherent value other than that of the forces as such. Consequently, debates are mostly over mere names, not their meaning. It doesn't matter if you stand for theism, atheism, or agnosticism. What matters is that you stand for anything under the current nominalist regime.
The true meaning of Christianity is being currently revealed. True transcendence, true resurrection, involves our coming out of the closet once and for all as technologically mediated transhuman beings. This is what it is to transcend bigotry, obscurantism. We are coming into the light as cyborgs, ready to express our true selves, our mechanically engineered selves. Amen.
Saint Augustine renders the Platonic notion of periagoge or epistrophe as conversio, Christian conversion is now a turn of consciousness, of conscious life, from the grasping of nature's gifts as means of empowerment to a receiving of nature's gifts as ends in themselves, not as idols then, but as veritable contents of the divine mind. For the true Christian, the natural or physical world emerges in God and not merely out of God. The way out of God coincides with that entering back into God to which St. Bonaventure will testify in his Itinerarium Mentis in Deum, Journey of the Mind within God. But is our world not a fallen one? Does the Christian pedagogy, the leading full circle, distract us from the fallenness of nature? Quite to the contrary, for it exposes the fallen, the merely material, to its destiny. True conversion is the act of seeing the low and visible in light of the high and invisible. True conversion as way of life.
The truth. I thought we were talking about a court of law. Come on, you've been around long enough to know that a courtroom isn't a place to look for the truth. You're lucky to find anything here that in any way resembles the truth. You disagree. Since when?
8 kids are dead, Jerry.
Jan, that suit fits you better than the sentimentality. That's not how you made all that money all these years, is it? You want to know when this case stopped being about dead children? The minute you filed the complaint, the minute it entered the justice system. Well, if you're really looking for the truth, Jan, look for it where it is, at the bottom of the bottomless pit.
But I really must try to find the place they call the Academy, where I can get directions home.
The Academy?
You know of it?
Oh, I wish the place had never been built. My husband collected the most brilliant minds from all over the world, and then he installed them at the Academy.
Where's the harm in that?
They have brought ruin upon this whole country. Everything outside my own estate is devastated.
Why?
Because the Academy has decided that the perfect new world cannot be constructed until the old one has been totally exterminated.
As Shakespeare warns us relentlessly, the modern world is a world of travesties, of impostures. An absurd world, ultimately, in which we invest our lives into pretending that there is no real evil. It's all in your head. We justify, we break down, we account for evil in terms of technical problems that we can solve through strategies of control, techniques of control. So what about people who say that there is real evil? They are really evil, or at any rate, what they're doing is really evil. If we could just get rid of those people, silence that objection, then we could have a world in which there's no real evil, in which all problems can be solved once and for all. The consummate travesty.
Today, people just don't like each other anymore. Do you think God is dead?
What?
God. Do you think he's dead?
Didn't even know he was sick.
You know what I think, and I've been giving it a lot of thought lately. I don't know if I can actually buy the fact that there's somebody up there. I mean, somebody up there. No, I've come to the conclusion it's a lot simpler than that. You know what I mean?
No.
I mean, say God is the conscience of man. Wouldn't that scare the hell out of you? Well, sure, because if that's what he really is, well, then maybe he really is dying.
Modern man wants to define himself. He is fed up with others defining him. The conventionalist reduction of identity to rules and regulations imposed upon us drives us to seek the subjectivist self-affirmation in an act of protestation. We want to define ourselves against all external restrictions. What is fixed must yield to what is ever changing. Yet, rebellion against impositions necessarily relies on a medium or ground supplied today by the machine, the Antichrist that tells us that we can choose our identity in the wake of the death of God. The machine that paints God as a mechanical imposition is the diabolical truth about all mechanical impositions.
What does it mean to fight for freedom? Many today seem to believe that to fight for freedom is to fight within a machine that guarantees us the right to fight. But is fighting for freedom really to fight within the machine, or to seek a life outside of the machine?
What happens when God is dead, or when people flatter themselves into believing that they are God? What happens is that shamelessness is mistaken for the ultimate courage.
How did people become gods? A simple answer would be that when God lost authority, when he ceased being paternal for us, we began relying on lesser authorities that we could use to flatter ourselves into believing that we are the masters of our own fate, as if the only authority we could accept was one that we could use to please ourselves.
What happens when law is in the hands of tyrants? What happens when law serves as instrument to punish the just and promote vice? Should honest men comply? Should they merely pretend to comply? Should they collaborate officially and then forget about the whole business in their hearts in private? Would that make them hypocrites, or merely cowards, or perhaps only pragmatists? Or should they risk being Christian about the matter? Should they be poets who, if only through their poverty, expose the problem at hand in light of a divine paradigm?
Who killed God? St. Paul spoke of the letter that kills. The letter killed God, leaving us with a godless law, a law without justice, a machine we bow to today as God himself.
Upon reaching its zenith in Hegel, modern reason teaches us that Adam was a childlike simpleton devoid of reason and knowledge. This representation of Adam serves to justify the rise of modern rationalism and its open society, and so too our own globalist regime. Yet in biblical Genesis and its canonical readings, we are not told that Adam was devoid of reason and moral knowledge. Quite to the contrary. What we are told is that God tells Adam not to seek knowledge of good and evil by severing its fruits from their source. For knowledge itself is a living tree rooted in God's own mind. We are thereby invited to ask ourselves if there is an alternative, pious way to attain to moral knowledge, another path, as in Dante's Altra Via, another reason. In the beginning, does Adam signal a childishness we should overcome, or a wisdom obscured by our present condition? Why does the world hate truth? Out of fear, of course. But why fear truth? We hate the light because we do evil. Evil-doing involves betrayal, which casts us into a world of compulsion, a broken order of things, a tempest in which things and words are alienated from each other. Therein, we crave certainties, beliefs to compensate for our loss of truth, of the wholeness of things, their being one with the understanding. We crave lies to hide our betrayal. We conspire against any return of truth, the living truth, the truth that speaks in dying, that reminds us of our shame. We hate the reminder because we no longer truly trust truth. We fear that the exposure of our betrayal will condemn us to lose not only truth, but our very pretense of truth. The institution of marriage confirms legally the sacred character of human life or birth. Marriage ties publicly human relations to nature as receptacle of inalienable dignity. Marriage tells us that our social interactions are not cut off from our birth, but tend naturally to what is divine in our birth. Marriage shows that the division between man and woman is by nature and meaningful, insofar as marriage naturally testifies to the capacity of the divine to be born on the plane of humanity.
Why shouldn't Jews convert to Christianity today? Do the Gospels not prove Isaiah right? No, they're merely signs calling us back to Isaiah so that we may discover therein a hidden truth.